Hey guys, Lewis here from swaphelper.com. I have in front of me the 2002 to 2004 and 2005 Excursion cluster helper. This has been in development for quite some time. We are really excited and proud of how it turned out, and I think you guys are going to be really happy with it as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into a quick unboxing, show you what's involved, the plug and play board, everything it comes with. There's a lot of similarities obviously to the 99 to 01 cluster helper. Then we're going to jump into looking at some of the cluster helper functionality, the diagnostic app on the computer, and then we'll take a look out in the trucks as far as where to mount the boost sensor if you have a diesel and you decide that you want to use that, and where to tap into the transmission range wires and all that. So let's go ahead and open the box. As usual, we're super excited as we always are on days like today. So first thing you're going to notice is you have the instructions here. As you go through these, obviously warnings, we obviously recommend that you read everything in its entirety prior to starting anything. And they're not very long, it's just 10 pages. It tells you all of what's included and what you should expect to receive. It gives you some information about how the cluster helper LED works, which is covered further as you go along. Highly recommend that you go to the website and watch these videos. You're probably on the website right now if you followed this link, because this is where the this video is located. It goes through everything, tells you what you need to know, what you want to avoid. There really aren't many wires to solder, but we went ahead and included that maybe from when you're doing your boost sensor wiring and stuff like that, because this obviously is plug and play. It's got a little breakdown of the wiring legend on where the wires go for the transmission range. And it covers all the different year models and potential things. There's really not that many wires for every truck. It talks about plugging in the cluster cable to the cluster itself. Talks about what the LEDs will look like, and that's about it. We include where to tap in for the transmission range information on the two different connector types, whether you have a 6.0 or not a 6.0. So the 7.3, the 5.4, and the 6.8 are all the same connector. They're in different locations, which we will cover later, and then obviously some technical specs, return policy, and warranty. So set that aside. Obviously, you got your cluster helper here. That's pretty self-explanatory. We have the double-ended 48-pin cable. It's going to say to cluster helper, and it doesn't matter if you accidentally hook this up backwards. It's the same connector on both ends, but the orientation of how it comes out of the cluster helper would be different. If you did it this way, it would come forward, and that doesn't fit very well. So we labeled one side to cluster helper, so that way it comes out and goes into the truck. And you'll see when we jump in the truck and show you how to install the plug and play board, which we're about to get to. So this is the plug and play board. So you'll see it's got two relays on it pre-installed. These are the connectors that just plug right in, and then you've got, let me open this up and we'll take a closer look at what that says. Okay, so open the bag. We're gonna go over this in just a second, but you've got these two zip ties. These are gonna be used, they actually go through like that, and they'll stay in there. They don't fall out or anything. So we're gonna cover how that all works in the truck here in a moment. But looking at the board itself, it has basically different columns depending on what your situation is. So like for the 6.0, you got the 5R110 TR. It explains where that needs to be connected, and it's got the CAN L and CAN H. We actually aren't going to be using, at least at time of launch, we're not going to be using the CAN. We don't need it. If we issue an update down the road and we want to add additional functionality, we need access to that bus, then we will explain what you need to do there. Now the wires are included, but you know, we'll cover that if we need to down the road. Now, if you have a 7.3, 6.8, or 5.4, you're going to connect these four wires for the transmission range. The tow haul input is so that when you click the tow haul on your new column, it'll turn on the cluster itself. Cluster info center buttons, that is covered in the instructions, but basically on an 8 to 10, that would be off to the right side. Not every 8 to 10 cluster has it. Some of them have the button on the cluster itself, and some of them have off on the right side of the bezel, have the three buttons. I think it's info, setup, and reset or something like that. So if you have an 8 to 10 with that on the side of the bezel, that's where those two wires will connect. If you have an 11 to 16, this is actually coming off the column because you're going to use it use the directional pad on the steering wheel to control the cluster, and that's where those will connect. And then lastly, you got the boost sensor. That's an optional boost sensor if you have a diesel, which we will cover the installation of later, but it's just 3 wires that connect there. The rest of it plug in. Just to follow up, we've contacted the manufacturer of these connectors. It took several weeks. We did a ton of investigation. These connectors are no longer available. So as soon as you purchase the cluster helper, you will, for a 2002 to 2004 Super Duty or 2002 to 2005 Excursion, you're going to receive an email from us with instructions about a form to download and basically send in a cluster board. Now, it doesn't have to be yours specifically, but you can get it from a salvage yard or whatever. But the bottom line is you have to send in a board with these connectors, which we harvest off the board to build the plug and play board. And so that's required for every customer that purchases this. So that's something to be aware of. So that's plug and play board. It's pretty straightforward. One side connects to the cluster helper cable, the other one connects to the truck. You got some of these optional wires here depending on your configuration, and then the 2 relays come pre-installed. The next thing, these are the wires. We include all the wires for every truck and every cluster helper, so you're not going to use all of them, but like you've got your boost sensor wiring here, the various lengths. I think the boost sensors are the longest. I think they're like 10 feet. We've got the transmission range wiring, tow haul, all that kind of good stuff. Lastly, we've got the accessories pack, if you will. It's got the USB cable. It's got the 11 to 16 mounting bar if you're going to do 11 to 16 instead of 8 to 10. It has the actual cable that connects from the cluster helper to the cluster. And of course, as we always say, it's the number one thing over there is verify your year range before plugging it in. You will damage the cluster helper, the cluster, bad day, all that kind of stuff if you plug an 8 to 10 cluster into the 11 to 16 port or vice versa. And as you can see, there are 2 ports and it's clearly labeled 11 to 16 port on top, 08 to 10. If you have any concerns about what your cluster you have, you can send us an email, contact@swaphelper.com, and we'll help you identify it. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward. We try to make this as simple and easy as possible to set up and install. And we've got really good feedback from the pre-production customers who had the units in their trucks. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into the diagnostic app. Instead of going out in the truck and trying to take a video of the various modes and how things work with the Windows app and everything, I decided to just do it here in the shop. I figured it would be a little bit easier to see what's going on. So we're going to take a look at the Windows application and the cluster helper and how it interacts, and the status LED, so you can get an idea of what's going on. Now, we've obviously got it mounted and connected on 11 to 16 cluster. It's connected, the cluster helper is connected to our quality control jig, which emulates an 03 or 04 6.0 engine setup or truck setup. So the first thing you'll notice is the indicator LED is fading or breathing from red to black, and what that's indicating is that neither the truck nor the cluster has been detected at this point. Now, 11 to 16 clusters are typically detected as soon as power is applied. Right now we have the power off to the cluster. The cluster helper is being powered through the USB cable only at this point, so obviously you can't detect anything. 8 to 10 clusters are typically detected as soon as power is applied to them, but some of the 8 to 10s are not, and they will not until the ignition turns on. Now, the truck is detected not until the ignition is turned on. So you reconnect your battery, it'll probably detect the cluster right away, and then you will see the it'll continue to pulse. The color will change until it detects the truck. Now, taking a look at the Windows application, you can see at this point we don't have any communication from any modules. Nothing's come through. Everything's set to auto detect, so truck, cluster, transmission, and so forth. And everything's showing over here that it has not been detected. So real quick, we'll just show you what it looks like. For instance, when the if you had an 8 to 10, so we'll go over here, we'll go to the drop down, we'll manually force it to 8 to 10 mode, and you can see now the LED is green and pulsing to yellow, meaning that the cluster has been detected as an 8 to 10, but the truck has not been detected. Now, if we come back here and we set it to 11 to 16, this may be a little harder to see through the camera, but you can see it perfectly here in person. It's going from blue to like a violet purple, and again, that means 11 to 16 cluster has been set or detected, and the truck has not. But we'll go ahead and we're going to put that back to auto detect. So everything here is set to not detected. So what we'll do now is I'm going to act like we had just connected the battery, just went out there after installation and reconnected the battery. See, the range indicator just turned on, and the cluster helper has now detected an 11 to 16 cluster. Again, I don't know if you can see the pulsing, but it's going from, or the breathing, it's going from blue to a purple or violet color. So now what we will do is go ahead and turn the ignition on, or emulate the ignition turning on. Okay, so now you can see the clusters on, and now the color of the LED on the cluster helper is like a solid violet or purple. And we come over here, we can see that the truck was detected as a 2002 to 2004 or 05 Excursion with a 6.0. The cluster is in 11 to 16 mode. We can see that we've picked up communication off the SCP and the UBP bus. So we are good to go there. So obviously you can look at the cluster. This is connected to the quality control jig, so the tachometer, speedometer, all that stuff's moving. You can see the range position sensor moving down here at the bottom. Now if you come back and take a look, you see right now the boost is at 46%. This is all emulated off of our jig, but this is a special feature of the cluster helper for using our boost sensor for these trucks. 05 to 07 doesn't have this functionality, but the older trucks do. So the 04 or Super Duty, 05 Excursion, and older. With our setup, you can actually select the range for the turbo scale. So, for instance, if we put it to 80 psi, you can see now it dropped to 23%. Which, if you look at the gauge, you see it's at about a quarter of the way. If I put it back to the default, come over here, now you can see it's about halfway, representing the 46% boost. And that's cool if you have, like, for instance, our truck has our shop truck has a compound turbo 6.0, compound turbo 12 valve that can produce 70, 80 psi. So that's what that functionality does. But the default's 40, matching the original gauge. But another important thing is that the transmission mode will always select an automatic. And it's important if you have a manual truck that you come in here and select, for instance, like a ZF6 manual. And what that's going to do is put the transmission range on 11 to 16 cluster to M, like you see there, because they didn't make a manual cluster after 2010. So that's kind of cool. So when you're driving the truck, the range position will show M for manual. It's also important that you do that so that the cluster helper can shut down the cluster properly and make sure that everything goes to sleep like it should. So you'll definitely want to make sure you do that. Also, an important thing that's noted in the instructions is that if the engine coolant temperature on a 2002 to 2003 7.3 is below about 45 degrees Fahrenheit, you will have to come in here and manually select your truck. So like 02, 03, 73 diesel. So that's something to keep in mind. If it's below that, it may be detected incorrectly as a different model, and then your engine coolant temperature gauge will not work properly. Another thing to remember, when you initially connect the USB cable, the cluster helper may restart a few times. So it's best to do it with the ignition off, obviously, since the cluster, and the cluster helper controls the interior lights and all that. Every time it resets, it would turn them on and off. So it's best to do it with the ignition off, since it resets several times. Now we'll take a quick look at what's involved in an update. As time goes on, we will be, I'm sure, issuing updates, additional functionality, all that kind of good stuff, and it's pretty simple. So you'll download, obviously, this cluster helper Diag app from our website, and all you have to do is connect to your cluster helper, select the update file, you select that file, and then just hit send update. Now in this case, you'll see that the and it may be kind of hard to see with the light, but the status LED is solid red now. And that indicates that it's in flashing update mode. You can see the cluster's off, it's updating, and you'll see everything's been removed from the Diag app since there's no communication at this point, and it's updating. So we'll wait for that to finish, and then you'll see it all come back to life. Okay, so there we go. It just came back, and you saw it automatically detected, since in this case the quote ignition was still on. It automatically detected the cluster, the truck, all that kind of good stuff. So, and your settings, whatever you set here, will stay. It's stored in non-volatile memory. So if you change this, it will stay. So that's a nice thing. So we, may issue updates, additional functionality stuff in the future, and that's how you're going to go ahead and update your cluster helper. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump out and go take a look at where to install the boost sensor, where you're going to tap in for your transmission range wires, and all that. All right, we are under hood on what was a 6.0 truck. It currently has a compound turbo 12 valve, as you can see here. And what we're going to look at is where to tap in for the boost sensor. So you can see we've got the boost sensor here. This is a little kit you can pick up on Amazon. It's by Glow Shift. I think it's like $7 or $8 to tap into. Now this arrangement is different. This is flipped around and some stuff because we obviously swapped engines here. So back when I was doing that, I made this little bracket and moved some stuff around. So yours will be a little bit different, but this will be the same on the 7.3 and the 6.0 trucks. So you'll want to find this map line, manifold absolute pressure, and tap in about like that. And then make sure you run your wires so they don't get caught or tangled in anything, and then run them back, and you're going to take them through the firewall, and that's going to be how to wire your boost sensor. Here we are under the hood of the 05 Excursion. This obviously has a 5.4 in it, and we're going to talk about where to tap in for the range position sensor wiring that's going to connect to the plug-and-play board. The wire colors are listed in your instructions, but they're in a few different locations depending on what engine your vehicle has. So for the gas vehicles, 2002 to 2005, for the Excursion, 2004 for the trucks, you'll find the area you need to tap into right where you see these wires going. I've just got them run temporarily from development. It's in this last connector. You can unplug that and verify the wire positions if you like in the wire colors, but you'll use the included T-taps to tap in about like you see there. If you have a 7.3, they're actually going to be, okay, so this is a gasser, so it's got the big master cylinder and vacuum deal there, but you'll have a hydro boost and there'll be a lot more room. And over on the firewall, be about right down here behind that, there will be a series of connectors on the firewall, and you will find the correct wires there. Now you should be able to, in the instructions, look at the included connector diagrams and find the appropriate one. If you have a 6.0, you should have a battery here and a battery on the other side, and the PCM is going to be mounted about right here. It will be a small connector. That is a connector that goes to the transmission. You can actually follow it down where it runs. You will find the range signal wire in that connector coming out and going down to the transmission, and that's the one that we're going to have to tap into there. So you'll see that coming out of the PCM. Now if your truck is a manual, obviously you're not going to tap into any of this, but when the truck auto detect does its detection, it will automatically select an automatic transmission. No pun intended. So you will have to use the Windows application to set the transmission in the cluster helper to manual. So in the interior of the cab, we have the plug and play board here. You can see I've got my stock connectors plugged in. Obviously I have a bunch of T-taps because this truck was used during development, and so I needed to have access to all those wires. This is prior to having the plug and play board, so you shouldn't have those, and so this will be a little easier for you. You want to plug in your boost sensor, your steering wheel buttons, which is what I have here labeled. And you've got your main harness that comes out of the other side and connects. This is 2 cluster. That sticker's since been updated. It says 2 cluster helper. You're going to want to make sure you connect that to the correct side. These connectors are identical, so you could mix them up, but you want to make sure the side that says 2 cluster helper goes to the cluster helper, and then the other side goes to the plug and play board. And essentially what we're going to do is you use the 2 black included zip ties, and obviously I can't do this with one hand. but you will end up flipping it over and putting it, it goes around about like that. And let's see if we get you a little better view here. So you see now it's tucked away. Obviously you want to do a little better job with your wires. That's how it's going to mount. It's going to be the zip ties. So it mounts inverted, and the zip ties will attach it and secure it to the driver's side air duct supply. Now you'll also want to pull off the side defrost piece here, the window defrost, because that's how you're actually going to get through here and get this all tightened up. So you can see you got the column helper installed down there. So so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and get those zip ties on there, pull them around, and then I will show you what it should look like. So I have the plug and play board loosely installed, and you can see the zip ties are coming through on this side. You can see the light, and you can see where the main cable comes around and bends back around and is accessible right here. And this is going to connect about like that to the cluster helper, which, by the way, to install the cluster with the cluster helper installed on the top, you will need to remove this top piece of your column cover, and then you will need to drop the tilt all the way down, and then you can squeeze. I don't know if you can see from this angle, you'll be able to just work it in and squeeze it in from this side. So the next thing that you're going to have to do is fish these back up through the other side and grab them over here. Now again, I have all these T-taps and it makes it kind of ugly and all that. Yours should be a bit cleaner than that. And so it should fit a little better in there. But you fish those back through and then tighten those zip ties to secure the plug and play board in place. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you what the finished product looks like. Okay, so I got the zip ties wrapped around the driver's side air duct, and I've got them attached. I haven't tightened them up yet, but you'll need to use a pair of like needle nose pliers and grab them and tighten them down. And you can see this cable comes out, wraps around. I'll show you what the installation looks like from the other side. So you can see there it's firmly pressed up against there, and then you've got the connector for the cluster helper itself here ready to go, and you've got some room there to work with so that you can attach it before you install it. You can also attach it, test everything, make sure the truck and cluster auto detect is working for you properly and everything. So we designed it so that it's got some additional length so that you can actually set the cluster out here in this area to do your testing if you need to. Okay, that'll do it. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any additional questions, you can shoot us an email, contact@swaphelper.com. A big thanks to the swap community that supports us, and another very big thanks to our employees who really worked hard. Everybody pulled together to knock this product out. So thank you for your time, and we'll see you guys soon.